Kia ora, tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Podigai in Western Ghats te Maunga, ko Kaweri flowing into the Bay of Bengal, where the river meets the sea, te awa, no Tamil Nadu, South India ho, ko Vigneshwara no Waka, the Cholas tohu, because we don't have a surname in our where I come from, and we just use the first name of a father, which I used to use. That was my maiden name, and later I took on my husband's first name. So I just connect myself with the Cholas, and ko Lilly Florence Toku Inawa. And I'm really thankful for this opportunity. A big mihi to the Rangahau department and for all the hard work that's gone in the last few years. So here I am. Sorry, I should have had a previous slide there, and that was the original title, but this in no way changes what the intention was. So this presentation came from the questions or patai, but those questions were mostly about what's going on in this world of NZCEL or English learning and English teaching context in New Zealand. Because New Zealand claims itself to be bicultural, and Te Wānanga Aotearoa also delivers these English language programs. And if you didn't know about the English language learning programs at Te Wānanga, the first reaction or response I've seen from many people when they hear that Te Wānanga Aotearoa offers English language programs. Oh, really? Te Wānanga, what does it have to do with English language programs? That's the first response that I get. And outside Te Wānanga Aotearoa, doesn't matter which context we are teaching the NZCEL in, the most common reaction or response to the program itself is that it's quite assessment heavy. Oh, its quality surveillance is too high and intense. How do you manage with the assessments with your Tawira? And all those questions are being thrown around. Now, this paper, it came about as a reflection, but I'd like to present a curious case in front of you, because people take quality for its face value or the facade, the way it looks like, and it can get easily taken at face value or pass on as unproblematic, not being questioned because of all the positive values or connotations or the guarantees that quality carries. One example is the transparency it talks about, the auditability it talks about, and comparability it talks about. And it also gives the power to the sector or organizations when it's quality audited, and it gives all these tags or stars or labels that get attached to quality that empowers, in a sense, that what Shelley mentioned about the real empowerment, because it's all the mechanisms that are in place. But when we see this, what I would like to raise here, in the context of Te Wānanga, when I entered this about 5 or 6 years ago, it became a really difficult balancing act for me as a program delivery manager in the last 2 years. It's a difficult balancing act to marry and meet the requirements set by NZCEL regulatory framework and Te Wānanga Aotearoa's vision, mission, and values. I couldn't see a middle ground, and I couldn't sway to any side either, because that's a big risk. And if we look at quality in its actual sense, it means that you need to assess risk before you do anything, and you can't really risk the image of the organization or the qualifications or whatever, the market risk that you're taking. So the day-to-day balancing act made it nearly impossible for me to make decisions about the day-to-day operations that a kayako are involved in, as to how to make this assessment more inclusive, for example. That's a question that comes up on a day-to-day basis. And Tawira success, how do we actually make sure a Tawira succeed when we don't have more or enough or sufficient assessment opportunities that Wananga talks about. Tawira success drives Tiwananga Aotearoa's values. So it's so difficult to marry them. Then the question came, what is the world like where NZCEL regulatory framework operates in? How does that world look like? Do we operate in that world? How can we make sense of that? And how can I actually apply that to Tiwananga context where we offer NZCEL programs? So this paper has come out of that. So this is a curious case, in fact. So by regulatory framework, I mean all the quality assurance instruments. For example, it's got its evaluative quality assurance framework. That's the name. And it uses monitoring and consistency reviews. And it also has EER, or external evaluation review. So interestingly, it's a good news that recently there's this introduction of a different alternative to the evaluative framework that NZQA uses that can be now applied to all the Maori educational programs, which is good. So what am I here doing with the NZCEL regulatory framework? Because it still applies to our English language programs. Whether or not it's delivered at Wananga doesn't matter. It still applies because we will get our consistency reviews or monitoring being done on a regular basis. So the rationale stemmed from this because it's going to be there. These quality surveillance is going to be there. And Tiwananga Aotearoa, Dynaspeak, is just the label that we use to deliver our programs. We are the key providers of NZCEL programs. We deliver all the 11 programs. And we are the single largest provider. So when I went in to see how the world looks like, I went in to see what was happening. And then I started digging deeper. And I found that these external evaluations, they came about in 2012. And of course, I was also teaching English and doing my research at the time. But I was in the industry, but not with Wananga. And everyone was puzzled by this auditory surveillance, or in a way, the structured self-assessment concept, where it seemed like giving power to the organization, or deregulation, where, it tells government is not going to direct what you want to do, what you have to do. You can decide what you can do. It's very much like empowering you. But in effect, it was controlling from the distance. And this happened at 2012. And coincidentally, Education New Zealand also became more powerful and more visible around the same time. Was it a coincidence? And this EQAF, or the Quality Assurance Framework, came about at the same time, a couple of years before. So from 2008, they started talking about tertiary education strategies and so on. And, this took me all the way. And when I start digging deeper, what was actually happening? What was the agenda behind all this? And it took me to the actual possible global policy influences on the NZCEL, as well as the New Zealand tertiary education framework. So when they talked about NZCEL programs or EER for any programs at tertiary level, it specified that these are for non-university sector. So they tried to differentiate university and non-university sector. And why did that happen? When there was the adult ESOL strategy released in New Zealand, but it wasn't applicable to NZCEL framework at all. It was teaching ESOL to adults, but it didn't apply the ESOL strategy that government published around the same time. So all this took me to the global stage where I could see that World Bank and OECD had already jumped in, and they had dictated this policy at a international level. And by 2012, so this is a period when internationalization and globalization of education was taking place, and mobility of graduates was becoming more and more possible. So the standardization or comparability was the talk, as well as funding or fiscal constraints on the governments. So they became more accountable for adults or employability or for various economic reasons. So there was a lot going on the global stage. That adult ESOL strategy came about and tertiary education strategy came about. All of these could have been a product of commercialization of education, and these seem to be driven by new public management. But how did I actually end up there without having a research approach to it? So I had a part, I was curious, but when I looked at quality, it obviously seemed uncontested or unquestioned, and people seemed to follow what it all said was supreme, and it had all the power and positive connotations. It was very difficult to resist. And this had its facade or consistency or confidence building and so on. Public good. Sorry, thank you. And did it serve specific interest? That was the question. So I had a research problem on hand. But was I questioning quality? No, I wasn't questioning quality. I didn't want to define what quality was. I didn't want to question the adequacy of the quality assurance framework, but I wanted to actually see what performance was quality expecting, its performative and discursive aspects, in a way that the agenda or the political, cultural, and social and economic agenda that it had. So I was looking for a framework or a lens or worldview that could help me study all this. So I was more critical in most of the different approaches that I had taken. So critical realism helped me explore what was happening in that world, or the hidden meanings, or what must the world be like for this to happen. So if I looked at NZCEL, one example was for assessments to be given just twice and the Tawira to succeed, it should not be in the indigenous Maori world. It should be in someone else's world that probably is possible. So whose interests is it serving? And to contextualize and further explore the aspects, cultural, social, political, and economic, I landed on the CCPE, or Critical Cultural Political Economy Framework. Mainly I drew on Jessop and Susan Robertson and Dale. I've referred in the reference list, but it's mainly helped me to contextualize, because I believe with this theoretical framework that no policy functions on its own. They need to be contextualized. And again, context cannot be too narrow. It's not just only NZCEL. If we only look at English language teaching, we'll be probably following what it says. But then it's on a global context. It's not just the local. It's not just the tertiary. It's not only the non-tertiary, a non-university. It's not only New Zealand. It's a global scale, and all the global and national actors working together to help meet certain agendas. And those are social, economic, and political agendas or commitments that they have to each other. So that's how I landed on those findings. So I would say the preliminary findings would be that confidently the framework had its economic imperatives, and it was working for global marketing, or so mainly for international students, not for domestic students. And now that domestic students and Wananga has a voice with the Maori framework, interestingly, I'm now a part of an NZCEL review board, and I was equally surprised to find that never before had there been a representation of Wananga on the ESOL or NZCEL board or review panel. That was really surprising when so many reviews had taken place. But now they are including Wananga, probably as a response or a proactive measure. And again, we need to engage in critical study using indigenous perspectives or the research perspectives to look at the agenda and see what best can be done and what we should be doing and how these could be utilized for Tiwananga Aotearoa's vision, mission, and values. Thank you for listening.